All right, so welcome to this presentation on automation essentials. I want to just kind of cover 12 different things that you can automate, and I'm going to break them down into categories of basic automation, intermediate automation, and advanced level automation. These are things that I think everyone should be doing no matter, whatever kind of business they have. So all lawyers should do this. And it doesn't matter whether you have a Mac or a PC. I have a Mac, so I may give you examples that I use with my Mac. But everything that is available on the Mac, somewhere out there, it's available on Windows. So, we can talk about how to find these things later. But basically, what we want to do is figure out what are the basic things with automation that are really going to make a big difference in our practice. So let's start with the essential things. At the basic level, you should be using preferences, setting the preferences for whatever program you're using. That is a type of automation, right? Like the system says, well, we're just going to default to this. And if you go, I don't like that behavior, you can override it, right? So if you don't like the fact that your word processing program always capitalizes the first letter of something after a period and a space because you don't want that for whatever reason, you can override that, right? You just have to go into the preferences. And people who are pretty savvy with automation always go right into the preferences of any new program or any new service that they're using, check out what things they have control over in the preferences, and then start controlling that. The other thing that you can have control over is your keyboard shortcuts. So the keyboard shortcuts are things that, you just tap on the keyboard instead of going over with the mouse and picking the menu item. And, as an example, Command, P is the command for print. If you're going up there and selecting print or doing things without using keyboard shortcuts, especially the most common ones like copy, paste, cut, print, and some other things like that, then you're not training your mind to think in terms of automation, right? So at the essential level, at the basic level, you really need to make sure you're getting the most out of these things, that you're setting preferences, that you always remember to do that, that if you've used a program for a long time, you might go in there and check the preferences to see either what kind of new preferences they might have added, or maybe some things have changed in how you want the program to function. And you can very quickly tab through and look at all the preferences. And we'll talk about this in a subsequent video when we focus in on each of these things. But for right now, just understand preferences are important, keyboard shortcuts are important. If you're using a word processor, which of course you are, knowing how to set styles in the word processing program is important so that you can quickly go in and update the styles so that everything matches. You can auto number. There's all kinds of sophistication in terms of the automation that is possible with word processing if you use styles, and most people are not using them, or not using them very much, or not using them well enough. So these are the essentials. You really need to drill into these and make sure you're doing these things well, because if you're not doing these things well, you're probably not going to be ready for the intermediate level, and definitely not ready for the advanced level. And then finally, there's templates. You can set up templates, and so that when you open a new document, you can pull a certain kind of template, and I'll show you how those kind of things work, again, in a future video that focuses specifically on that. But that's the first three things. That's the basic level. Then at the intermediate level, and we have 6 things here, but the first 3 are knowing how to filter your emails, so that emails that, for example, all involve like newsletters or anything that has the word unsubscribe, you can set up a filter and say, I want all the emails that have the word unsubscribe in them, because those will be email newsletters or promotional offers and things like that. I want those filtered over to a separate folder. I want them to bypass my inbox, and then I can remember once a day, if I have time, to go in and look at those. But otherwise, I'm not going to see them, because if I see them, I'm going to have to think about them and get them out of the inbox and make a decision, and you don't want to have to do that. So you want to automate that and filter it. Now, there's a tool called SaneBox, which will do this for you automatically, and you just pay them their service. It's a subscription service, and then they automatically filter out the emails using artificial intelligence that gets updated based on your behavior and some algorithms and so forth. So SaneBox, totally worth it. I use it. Everybody I know who's super adept at automation uses it and loves it. But at least at a basic level, you need to be filtering your emails. Then you can use templates within your emails for emails that you send out to people, just like you can with your word processing, right? So the templates could be your signature, right? You can have a different signature that appears at the bottom of your email, and all that gobbledygook with the disclaimers, which should not be in there automatically. That should be a specific signature that when you need to use that, you pull from the drop down and apply that template to your email. But the fact that every email program lets you have these different signatures at your ready disposal means you could basically use them as pre-canned emails. And Google's mail service has these things called canned responses. So you should be developing canned responses in your emails for certain kinds of emails that you typically send or respond to, and you want to be able to do them quickly and easily from within your email program. I use a program called Spark Email on my iPhone, and if you have an iPhone, you can use this. It's free, and it has templates built in, and it's super powerful. You can even have hyperlinks in the templates, all kinds of cool stuff. It can even automatically fill in the name of the person if the person's name, if they send you an email and their name appears in their email send thing, then you can have it say, hey, first name, and it will respond. So Spark Email is free, super powerful, amazing tool. It has a Mac version for the desktop if you are a Mac user, but it works on an iPhone. Doesn't matter what email service you use, works with them all. So email templates, super powerful. Password manager is also important. Like, you should be managing your passwords using a password manager. And there are specific ones like 1Password or LastPass. I use both of these, but I mostly use 1Password. I recommend LastPass because it's basically free. But the idea of you individually managing your passwords is insane. You shouldn't be doing that. You should use a password manager. And then next three things at the intermediate level are text macros. When you are creating text in a word processing document or email or wherever, you should be able to take text macros that you need to use to generate commonly used documents or templates or whatever. You should be able to spit those out really easily. And there's a tool called Text Expander, which used to be Mac only, but now works both on Mac and Windows. Highly recommend it. In the Copilot coaching program, we focus on this a lot because it's a tool that's very powerful, but people tend to level off, or either they don't get up and running with it, which is a shame, or they start using it at a really basic level and don't take it to the next levels. So that's why it's important to keep focusing on this tool, because it's super powerful, works everywhere, works on Macs, PCs. It even has an iPhone app that works there too. So text macros, super powerful, and Text Expander is the best tool for this. Online scheduling, everyone should be doing this. You shouldn't be telling people, hey, listen, this is when I'm free. You should just send them a link and say, here's my calendar, just book online. And then once they book online using a service like Acuity or Calendly or whatever, then everything gets automated after that. Like, they automatically get an email the day before saying, by the way, tomorrow you have an appointment with Ernie. And then they get an email an hour before, hey, by the way, an hour away till your appointment with Ernie. And there's links where they can reschedule or cancel, and just makes your life easy, makes their life easy. Everyone should be using an online scheduling service. And like I said, I use Acuity. I like it. I recommend it. I've used Schedule once, and I didn't like it as much as Acuity, but it's roughly the same cost and works the same way. And I know a lot of people like Calendly. Doesn't matter which one you use, you should use one of them. And then last, you should use ConvertKit or MailChimp for doing email broadcasting. Now, this is something you would do with marketing, and I'll tell you about that a little bit later. But basically, whenever you need to send a lot of emails to a group of people, especially if there are people outside of your law firm, and since you guys are all solo and small firm lawyers, that's who I deal with, and not in a big firm. If you're going to be sending emails to a lot of people, it's going to be outside of your firm. It's going to be to your networking group. It's going to be to the referral partners you have, and you could do this from your email account individually. But the reality is, you don't want to waste your time doing it. And besides that, like, if you try to send an email to more than 100 people, Google won't let you, and most email services won't. So that trick of, making it go to yourself and blind carboning everybody else, and sending an email that way, that's not a good way to do it. The best way to do it is to use an email broadcasting service. And there's some out there that you can use for free with a limited number of names, and then you can up level to some other level. I use ConvertKit. I've used them all. I've used MailChimp. ConvertKit is the best. It's $29 a month. totally recommend it. I think everybody should use that and learn how to use it for marketing purposes mostly. Then when we get to the advanced level, here's where things, when you get to the advanced level, if you're doing all these other things, you will be ready for these things. So right now, you may not be ready for it, but just so you understand what's coming down the pike, is you can have your computer look at a folder and say, I'm watching this folder all the time. And if a file drops in there or something happens, I'm going to do some automation. I'm going to, delete the file after 10 days if it's been sitting on the desktop for 10 days, or I'm going to rename it and put it over here. You can have your computer watching a folder and then take action based on time, based on the type of file it is, all kinds of cool stuff. And so there are tools to do this. On the Mac, the tool that you should check out is called Hazel. On the Windows side, I'm sure there's other similar things. The other one is, now API stands for Application Programming Interface, and that means when a piece of software is, when the developer decides that we're going to open up a portal through which other applications can interact with this application. So, for example, Microsoft Word can have some plugins that work with Microsoft Word, but for those plugins to work, Microsoft have to say, okay, well, we're going to let other applications work with Word, but we're going to let it work with Word for these things. They have to define what those things are. So that's the application programming interface, is sort of that portal that lets things connect. The best way to connect things is through web applications. So if you're using Clio and you want to take information in a Google spreadsheet, which is, both of those are cloud-based tools, you can make API connections and make automation happen using a tool called Zapier or Zapier. People pronounce it differently, but the play on words here is in the middle of the word is the letters API, right? See, Zapier, API. So it's a play on the words of like you're, zapping two things, and creating automation through these API connections between different web applications. And if you go to Zapier and look at all the different things it can connect and the different ways it can connect, it's mind-boggling. It's like, like staring out at the stars and in the desert sky. There's just thousands of different things you can connect. But you have to learn how to do this, or if you at least understand what can be done, you could pay somebody, an outsourced person, and say, look, I don't want to bother to do this. Could you just set it up for me? But all kinds of magic can happen when you can make different web-based applications talk to each other and do things automatically. And then lastly, there's scripting that can happen on your computer, which is basically like chaining together a series of things that can happen. And basically anything that you could make your computer do in a sequence of things that you do, even if those things involve going from one program to another and selecting different things. And if there's some pattern to that and you want to replicate it, you can replicate that pattern very easily using scripting. And on the Mac side, there's a tool called Keyboard Maestro. And this is a tool that, really savvy people like David Sparks, who's an attorney in California, who has a whole course on how to use Keyboard Maestro. And also Michael Hyatt, whom I talk about quite frequently because while he's not a lawyer, he's a very serious-minded professional who doesn't chase shiny objects, and he's very serious-minded. So he's not the kind of person who's just born a techie, but he appreciates the value of automation, and he's a Mac user, so he uses Keyboard Maestro. So when you see people using these tools and you realize, like, okay, people are pretty savvy about this. If, for example, well, it doesn't matter whether you're a Mac user or not, you can use Zapier. But if you're a Mac user, you're going to know about Hazel and Keyboard Maestro if you're at the advanced level. Everybody who's at the advanced level knows about these tools and uses them because they make your life easier. So that's kind of an overview of basic automation, and I'm going to drill into these each individually and show you how they work in separate tutorials. But I wanted to tell you one last thing, which is when it comes to using email automation, like I talked about with ConvertKit or MailChimp, I have a separate training about this called The Trusted Lawyer, and it's about how to get referrals by email and using automation, which depends on using MailChimp or ConvertKit. But basically, once you get the system set up, which takes 3 hours at most, then you can spend 30 minutes a month sending a single email to a group of people, and that will very reliably and predictably get you new clients. So, first thing to do is go to the Facebook page for this, which is called Referral Marketing by Email for Lawyers. It's a private group, and if you want to sign up, you just apply to join and then answer the questions to let us know you're a lawyer, what kind of law you practice, and so forth. And then in there, we will be talking about how you can do this, how you can implement the system. So that is it. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to entertain them. Otherwise, that concludes this presentation.